Hi, we're Shane and Natalie.
And we are nerds.
Today, as you might surmise by our little friend here on the table, talk a little bit about Avatar. What do you think?
I enjoy the show very much.
Well, that's interesting that you say that, because what I wanted to actually talk about is something I've been thinking about recently, which is that an Avatar is a show that sometimes, when I'm watching it, I wonder, why does Avatar work? Versus other shows, and Avatar has some of the same problems, but it works. And other shows don't. You have no idea what I'm talking about?
No, I don't.
Okay. Okay, so one of the things, for instance, right, is like, so when you're watching Avatar, especially in, it's not the whole show, but for certain parts of it, there's parts when you're very much, you watch it and it's just kind of like, it seems like you're watching a bunch of just bad people. Like, there's large stretches of the show where Aang is just being kind of like angsty and selfish and whiny. But it works. Right?
Yeah.
Your introduction, one of the most beloved characters in all of, like, nerd culture, is Toph. Toph is kind of just a jerk.
Toph remains kind of just a jerk through the entire show, but somehow you still love her.
But somehow you still like her.
Yeah.
Now, and one of the things about Toph, now maybe others would have a different opinion than me, but when you get to, like, Korra and they bring her back, it's like you get only the jerk.
Yeah, they missed the parts of her that are actually good and the parts of her that make her a good character.
Here's an idea. Maybe when the character's not a 10-year-old girl, they don't have any likable parts to them. But I don't know. No, but I'm not.
It's possible.
But that's an exaggeration.
Yeah.
So, but what I'm saying is that's one thing. I have never sat there watching Avatar and thought. I kind of felt the same way as like when you're reading or watching like Harry Potter and the angst, right? But so what's the difference? And I don't have an answer to this.
That's actually an interesting point. I hadn't thought of that. I think maybe some of it is that my issue with like when the angst happens in Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, which should be named Harry Potter and the Year He Has Hormones. I feel like the problem with the books where Harry gets really angsty was that J.K. Rowling's editor needed to actually say, honey, you're talking too much. This is nonsense. Make it go away. A good editor will cut crap like that.
That might be true, but it's still in there.
It is, unfortunately, because she got too popular.
And it's still in there with Aang.
But I think some of it is maybe it's not constant for Aang. So Aang has his moments where he gets kind of angsty and selfish and a jerk. But he then, like, the next episode, he'll do something, like, he'll do something good. I can't, unfortunately, think of anything right now because I can't think of any specific times when he's angsty.
Well, counterpoint, the reason I started to think about this is because he did it once, and I was like, yeah, I remember he's like that. And then you move on to the next episode, and he's fine. But then, like, the one after that, he's like that again. And so you had this stretch where it was kind of like, angst, like Buddhist. Angst, Buddhist, angst, and it just kind of going back and forth. And so it's not constant, but it sure as heck comes up a lot.
It does come up a lot, but it's not with Harry Potter, with Harry, especially in this 5th book, but it is still there in the 6th and 7th book. There are just there's this entire stretch in the middle, and usually it's a part of the books that I skip when I'm rereading them. You have the entire stretch of several hundred pages where Harry does not stop being angsty. and he is just a whiny, selfish jerk that I love the Harry Potter books. I don't like Harry.
Katniss.
I don't like Katniss either.
Peeta.
I like Peeta more than Katniss, but that's not saying much. I don't like Katniss.
See, I thought the first book was okay.
The first book's okay. The problem... I don't think the books are... But we're not talking about the Hunger Games.
I know, but the point is that...
I don't think the Hunger Games books are bad. I think they're an interesting look, but I don't think the characters in those books are terribly likable except for Prim.
Right, so the characters, that's what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
That's another thing where... And it's not like... okay, so here's a big one. Okay? Not necessarily the... in the book, right? Mm-hmm. But in the film, Frodo.
Oh my god.
Especially,
effeminate Frodo.
Right? He's effeminate, but Lord of the Rings.
Yes.
I mean, yeah, obviously, Lord of the Rings has Frodo. Return of the King, the film.
Oh yeah.
Is when he's really bad, right? But Frodo has his good moments too.
Yes, he has the moments where he comes out of it.
Right, even when he's got the ring and the
even when he's most
two towers,
heavily under the influence of the ring.
Exactly, he comes in and out of it too. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
But with Aang, it's like I don't look and hate Aang. It's something I hate. I mean, I guess I do hate Frodo. Let's be honest, but. Taking apart that personal, if I'm trying to be, yes, we'll have a whole discussion about how I hate Frodo. But if I kind of take the personal and try to look at it objectively, okay, and I have you too to kind of, you also are aggravated by Frodo,
especially in the movies.
In the movies, right?
Oh my gosh.
But Aang, it doesn't come through like that. You get frustrated with him temporarily.
I think I figured out.
But he's the same. But it's the same thing because he has reasons.
Yeah.
Okay, there's reasons why. Appa got stolen away. Now he's mad. Well, Frodo has the ring and he's an evil.
Literally being oppressed by a demon, basically.
Right. So he has his own.
I think I figured out part of it. I think part of it is how old Aang is compared to most of these other characters we've been talking about. Harry hits his angsty stage at like 15, 16, 17. Frodo is 50. Katniss Everdeen is 16 or 17. I don't remember which. She starts out as one of them and then gets older. Aang is 12. Aang is much younger, and he's a little kid who's dealing with heavy things like the other ones are, but he's younger, so I feel like it makes it more believable that he kind of vacillates back and forth, and it makes him a little bit more easily likable.
That's true, but...
I think that's part of it. I don't think it might be all of it, but I think it's part of it.
Maybe it's part of it for you. I don't think it is for me because...
I don't know if that's part of it.
He's supposed to be 12, whatever, right? Mm-hmm. They're all 10, 11, 12.
No,
right? Sokka's older.
Sokka's 14. I think Katara's supposed to be 12 or 13.
Oh, 14. What a wizened.
Yes, he's so old.
But I don't.
Mature.
I don't.
I think Toph might be 10.
Yeah, I don't watch that show, and I don't think of them as being that young.
No,
you have
to remind yourself.
I think of them all as being 15, 16.
They act like they're much older than...
Exactly.
Especially most teenagers.
So even if it's true that Aang is supposed to be 12, mm-hmm. I just don't think that... Because he, for all intents and purposes, when you're watching it, I don't think that you really think that. So, for instance...
You do when his first thing he asks after coming out of the iceberg is to ride the penguins. That feels very 12 to me.
Did you know that... and I didn't even know this, that in Lilo and Stitch, mm-hmm. that Lilo is supposed to be like 5.
Yeah.
I always thought she was 10.
No. Oh gosh,
I never saw her as...
No, that's quintessential 5-year-old.
I don't know. We have a 5-year-old and she seems way less developed than Lilo.
I mean, there are some ways where Lilo is probably a little bit more developed, but Lilo also had this tragedy with her parents. So in some ways that would make her grow up possibly a little faster. Also, every child is different.
Well, right. And they're trying to make the character work for a movie.
Yeah.
So I get that. All I'm saying is that I think it's very common to have characters who, they're trying to, they're saying that they're a certain age officially, but when it comes down to it, the way they act, the viewer never interprets them that way. I don't know if I'm the only person that watched Lilo and Stitch, and just never saw her as that young. Okay, maybe if you would have said 7 or 8, I would have bought it.
What is she doing?
We have a cat.
Who does things?
Maybe if you would have said 7 or 8, I would have bought a Lilo. But I don't look at Aang ever and say, oh, he's only 12. He's only 10.
I can see Aang being 12 sometimes, but there's a lot of times he definitely has maturity far beyond 12. Even when he's struggling with stuff, a lot of times he seems like he's older. But there are also the times when he, wants to ride a penguin. Yeah. Or when he wants to go ride giant elk. Especially in the very beginning of the first season, he definitely does feel like a much younger.
But are you thinking about all that stuff in a way that's, is that actually impacting your thoughts on him when he's not being that way?
I don't know. I don't think so, because it was just something that occurred to me as we were talking about it, that he is so much younger than any of the rest of the characters we were talking about. I don't know if that's actually why. It was just a thought that I thought I would bring up. I don't know if it's causation or if it's correlation.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Katara is another character who has her unlikable moments.
Oh my gosh, yes.
She's a nag.
Yes.
She's
very naggy.
She just is.
She's also oversensitive.
Okay.
Is a kind way to put it. It's a joke that she's not like that. That she's not exactly like that in the movie, but she also kind of is.
Well, that's the other thing. It is weird because in the movie, I think the characters are less likable.
Oh heavens, yes.
Look, the movie is so bad that you can't even compare it. It might be the worst film that I have ever seen.
Oh my gosh!
Maybe that or Lost in Space, but
I don't think I've ever seen. There's just. The script was bad, the directing was bad, the pacing was bad,
right.
the effects were bad. The effects looked good, but the effects were bad. It was just bad.
We talk about that another time, I guess. If you want to see that discussion, then let us know. But I guess what I'm saying is that the characters are so different in the movie, right?
It's like they just read a synopsis.
But the characters are different in the sense that those kind of annoying things are kind of I don't think Katara is a nag in the movie. She should have time to be.
No.
I don't think that Aang is selfish exactly. Again, he doesn't have time to be.
He doesn't have time to be anything.
But they're somehow less likable, even though they don't have the same flaws showing through.
Yeah.
So, again, I don't have answers for this. It's interesting to me that that's the case.
I don't necessarily have an answer to it either. I do think it isn't. I hadn't even thought about it before you brought it up. That is an interesting point. That there are different kinds of characters that have these angsty moments, and even ones that kind of come in and out of it, like Frodo does. But somehow Aang feels more likable even during that than some of the other characters, and I don't know necessarily why that is.
So another thing about Avatar, that this one isn't even maybe a more interesting discussion, because of the fact that I would say that it. It runs up against other shows also and other books and things, but it also runs up against the Korra, its own kind of, its own franchise.
Yeah.
Which is, so to me, let's start with Korra. One of the biggest issues with Korra is everyone is way too overpowered.
Yes.
And so they keep just knocking the villains up to just these ridiculous levels. That it's just like to the point that like in the final season, Kuvira is just this earthbender. She's not anything special, but she is by far the most powerful character that's ever been in the franchise.
Yeah.
And it's really frustrating. But here's the thing. If you actually watch, Avatar, the original series, there's a lot of that too. Or at least it shows up at times, but it doesn't ruin the show.
I think part of it, at least in the original series, is that the characters, at least my experience with the Avatar versus Korra, was that the original series with Aang, the characters are just far more likable than they are in Korra. So maybe that's part of why it is less aggravating, that there are the overpowered characters. But also, in the Avatar series, a lot of the overpowered characters remain in the show longer than they do in Korra. Because Avatar keeps the same main arc for all 3 seasons, whereas Korra has a different arc every season.
Well, that's part of the problem with Korra is, it's kind of like in a lot of other franchises. One of the nice things that Star Trek did that made it so successful is, Kirk has this line in Generations where he says, "I was saving the galaxy when your grandfather was in diapers," but he wasn't saving the galaxy most of the time.
No,
he was trying to save like 4 people from dying. The ship could have flown off, and the people on the planet would be dead. But
but the ship would be fine.
So it was like it wasn't always this high stakes thing.
It was Kirk's focus on the importance of the individual.
Well, it was the characters you're looking at on the screen right now. It wasn't the whole world's going to blow up.
Yeah.
And with Korra, that's what it is every single season, and then they have to make the next one worse.
Yeah, they have to make the stakes higher every time.
But see, I still think in Avatar, in the original show, there's times, and it does bring me out of it a little bit, but not enough to ruin it. Like, I think the worst thing in the entire Avatar series, okay, in the entire first show, is Ty Lee. I think Ty Lee, whenever she's on the screen, I know I'm watching a TV show. I am just pulled out of it. I think that I'm paying attention to what the writers are doing. Ty Lee is this character who has a cool idea. She does not bender, and yet she is able to fight with the benders, right?
Yeah, which is a fantastic concept.
She even has this idea that she can counter the benders. Because she can shut down the bender, right? That's a cool idea.
Yeah.
Here's the problem. She has literally no weakness. And she can do her thing in literally instantly.
Yeah, it's like jab, 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 you're out.
Yeah, but you just did it about 10,000 times slower than
Well, yes, because I wanted the camera to actually be able to see it. Also, I am not Ty Lee, and if I tried to do that, I would probably actually accidentally hurt you. And I don't want to hurt you.
But
I'm klutz.
She has so much flexibility. She can dodge through when the writers want her to, which is usually 43 people to get to the person. Boom, boom, and then you're done. And then it's not only the benders; it's everyone.
It's not like the chi blocking just blocks the bender. It physically takes you. It basically paralyzes.
If she could do that to the benders, but then she's susceptible to a guy with a boomerang. Yeah. Then she's a balanced character.
The problem is they give no balance for the chi.
Look at what she does is not okay. It's more or less the same thing that Amon does in the first season of Korra, right? He takes away people's bending.
Well, except he does it permanently.
Sure, correct, but same concept. And what does he do? He needs to get you there, and he needs like several moments with you, and you have to be kind of.
But that's the spirit bending versus.
I get it. So I'm not talking about in-universe explanation.
Okay.
I'm talking about from the standpoint of the drama of the show. He has the same power as her for all intents and purposes, right? He's permanent, but whatever. That's kind of like it's a side thing almost.
I don't know if that is a side thing though, because the fact that his is permanent and hers is just a temporary kind of preventing you from using this thing. I feel like that is kind of an important differentiation in how they apply it. Now, I do agree that Ty Lee is overpowered because chi blocking should not just like make Sokka unable to use his arm. Sokka has no bending. If chi blocking is supposed to prevent you from using bending, then it should not have any effect on Sokka. Or if you're saying that it's preventing bending because they can't do the moves, that still doesn't make a lot of sense.
Here's where we're going to come back to why it's the same thing as Amon, though. Or even if you disagree, ultimately, I think the point will still be because the way that Ty Lee is characterized and presented in that show, right? She is literally unbeatable. When you watch what she can do, you can't see her coming. She can get to you no matter what defense you have. She can do the thing. Maybe the only one that could actually, if they knew she was coming, maybe Toph could make like an armor of rocks.
Toph could probably pretty easily fend her off because of.
But what I'm getting at is that she can get there and do the thing, and she does it so consistently and so well and so unpredictably, and so. But
she never accidentally hits the wrong spot.
But she's but she's one of the bad guys, right?
Yeah.
And even though the show is serialized, it's still kind of episodic too, in the sense that the good guys have to kind of, for the most part, win that episode. And so she always ultimately has to lose. And so what I'm getting at is that it always seems like with Ty Lee, okay, she does a bunch of stuff and she's awesome. And with a couple of exceptions, the only time she actually fails, and so the good guys are able to escape or win or whatever, is something that's just like, that happened because the writers wanted it to. It doesn't feel natural. It doesn't feel like that's what really would happen.
Yeah.
I can only think of one example where I think it's done well. And so there's the one with the drill, where Katara has her kind of stuck in the water.
And then Toph helps, and because the water is like the dirt sludge thing, so the two of them keep her stuck in there basically.
That makes sense.
Yes.
And you can say, okay, I can accept her as this super powerful, acrobatic person, but then she still can't do it. But then in all the other ones, she just, it's just like, the writers, said it's time for her to be defeated.
Yeah.
And so that kind of, I think that's the worst thing about the show.
Yeah. And then Korra does it with basically every character. Every character is overpowered, like Ty Lee. Yeah,
but in Avatar, even though you have Ty Lee doing that, so the thing is that in Avatar, here's the thing, and this is actually bad writing, but it still works, is the characters are always as overpowered. So in Korra, they're just overpowered, and they're written that way, and they're just, that's the permanent state of them. They're OP. In Avatar, they're situationally overpowered whenever it is that the plot needs it. So the other one, May, her ability with the knives is
she's got crazy good aim.
Is so good that nobody else stands a chance when that's what they want.
When they, at least with May though, when they don't want her to do it, it's more along the lines of her being lazy rather than her just not. That's
true. They do kind of put that
because it's part of her character that she's just kind of like, she doesn't care. She's like she wants something to do, but so she likes the fact Azula's asking her to do something, but she also kind of doesn't want to do it sometimes. Like there are times she's just like, I don't care enough about this right now to try.
Yes.
So they kind of wrote it into her character to make it part of her character to fail sometimes. Because part of her character is just, I don't know.
And that works.
And it makes sense.
And that works. There's probably other characters or other situations that I can think of. I mean, obviously Azula is ridiculously powerful when they want her to be. Which, again, it's not, but it just kind of works. The whole way that it all comes together.
I think part of it is that they do have the underpowered characters, too, because, Sokka is good. Sokka is not overpowered at anything. They kind of touch on it in that episode, The Master. There is nothing that Sokka is like, phenomenally. Sokka's not overpowered. Sokka's an ordinary person. Zuko, as much as he is one of the main characters, he is not overpowered. He struggles with his firebending for a lot of the series.
That's true, but the thing about Zuko is he's like... he does struggle.
Yeah.
But then it's like, it's time for him to fight Aang, so he's going to be awesome.
Yeah.
He struggles against Azula.
Which is probably partially a confidence thing in terms of
That
his
is
character.
probably true, although he is depicted as always having been not all that good.
Compared to Azula, yeah.
And he spends the first 2 seasons... I mean, he ends up being the one who's supposed to teach Aang how to firebend, but he spends the first 2 seasons trying to get Iroh to teach him...
Beyond
the basics. In some ways.
At least to some extent, though, I felt like the way that they depicted Zuko after the point where he decided to teach Aang was at least to me, it seemed like Zuko was always hoping to get back to Uncle Iroh so that Uncle Iroh could help him teach Aang. At least that's kind of how I understood it. Was like part of it was seeking redemption from his uncle and seeking that forgiveness from his uncle. At least that's partially how I saw it. I could be wrong. There was also some level of mastery attained implied when he went and met the dragons.
So the dragons, I've seen discussions about this. And the thing about the dragons is, well, so in the show, it's depicted more as though they're teaching... I've seen people raise that point that you did before. Mm-hmm. Seems to me that in the show, the dragons are more about kind of teaching the source as opposed to the technique. I mean, I don't think you're supposed to imagine that Zuko is kind of like... The dragons are like...
telepathically communing.
It's not like that thing in Spock's brain where you just learn all the...
Oh my God.
Right?
That episode.
It's not like that.
No.
It's just
At least the way it was kind of explained, though, in that episode and kind of implied in some of the backstory with Roku and stuff like that, was once a firebender reached the point where they talked to the dragons and had a relationship with the dragons, so to speak, and met the dragons, it implied that the dragons were able to help communicate a certain level of the mastery of help them with their firebending more so than before they had encountered the dragons, kind of like Toph and the Badger moles.
Well, it's true, but
because it's implied that all 4 of the elements of bending were originally used by one of the creatures. The airbending was used by the bison.
Yeah.
The dragons used fire. The Badger moles used earth, and who used water? I don't remember who used water, but somebody used water that they are... Oh, the moon. They learned it from the moon and the pole, because the moon, of the way the moon, the pole...
I mean, the thing is, though, you can only take that so far, because otherwise... remember, the whole reason they're going to Dragon is Zuko needs to teach Aang how to firebend, but Zuko can't do it anymore. And so Zuko has to learn how to do it again so he can teach Aang. But what does he need to teach Aang for if the dragons have already taught Aang? Mm. So...
That makes sense, but actually that makes me think of why it actually might have mattered, because part of the whole thing when Iroh was working on the basics with Zuko was having trouble with the source even before that. It was fueled by his anger, but because anger is a variable thing and it's hard to keep up, that was part of his problem with firebending, was the fact that he didn't understand the true source of fire. And so since he didn't understand the true source of the fire in order to firebend, he was struggling, and that's why Iroh was keeping him at the basics. So Zuko probably was familiar with more advanced forms and stuff like that. I mean, he probably had practiced them minus the firebending when Iroh wasn't looking. But so once he understood the true source of firebending from the dragons, then he could take this source, that information about the source that he had been missing before, that Iroh had been trying to teach him, and that now he understood, and use it to apply to his firebending, which would give him a greater mastery in order to teach Aang. Possibly. That was a theory that I just came up with right now.
I also just had a thought.
Okay.
I have to look at the episode list and go through, but I think I might figure out why Avatar works.
Why?
I mean, this is a theory that is so crazy and stupid that it would be hilarious if it were true. But I actually think it might be true.
What?
I'm 100% serious in proposing this, and I have to look at the list. But like, what if Iroh is the reason that Avatar works? What I mean by that is
that would make 1,000%
true. Yeah, but
sense.
Okay, haha, everybody loves Iroh, but
No,
think about
it really
this.
does make sense.
Aang's being angsty, right? Now here's Iroh with some tea. Katara's being naggy. Now here's a scene where Iroh is, picking a flower. It's like every time a character does something aggravating. So this is what I'm getting at is I'm trying to remember the kind of whole arc. Is it the case that in those episodes that heavily featured the kind of main cast being kind of aggravating?
Yeah.
Were those also episodes where they were just kind of showing Iroh just kind of like doing random stuff?
Well, not just doing random stuff. It was showing Iroh kind of mentoring other people. Because that was Iroh's whole thing was that he wasn't committed to the firebenders above all, blah, blah, blah type thing.
Well, but he everybody loves Iroh. And I'm serious that I think that when you think about, I don't know episode for episode, but at the very least the periods of time when I can think of the other characters being aggravating are periods of time when it's like Iroh and Zuko are trying to lie low and he's just kind of getting excited about
ridiculous
about a tea shop or
and being wholesome. And I think that might be it because Iroh only shows up like twice, I think, in Korra. He does show up.
He shows up in Korra?
He's in the spirit world like once or twice.
I don't remember that at all.
Because Korra mentions him to Zuko and Zuko's like, wait, what? And then that's the last time you see Zuko in Korra.
I didn't remember that.
Yeah, she encounters him.
I didn't know
She encounters him in the spirit world because Zuko thinks he's dead. And then she mentions that she met him in the spirit world, and he's like, wait, what? Oh. And then that's the last interaction they have in the series. See, I think that might also be the last time you see Iroh. I don't think you see him more than once or twice in Korra. And I think they're in the first 2 seasons. Actually, it might be in the 3rd season when What's-His-Face traps her in the spirit world, or is meeting her in the spirit world or something.
The whole show is just so fuzzy to me.
Yeah, I know, because we did... Well, it also does not help that we have not shown Korra to the children, and the children rewatch Aang on a regular basis.
Here's a good idea.
Do we have to?
What if there was a show? See, everybody wants this prequel about Iroh now, and I don't get it.
I thought everybody wanted a prequel about What's-Her-Face, Kyoshi.
Oh, I guess, I don't know. The one I've heard about is that people want to see the kind of backstory to Iroh, which I think is
a terrible idea.
Terrible idea.
You're going to ruin Iroh.
Right, you can't... People like him. His whole character is the
wise old uncle.
Well, the guy that is like...
And kind of kooky.
Sure, but he's... It's like, you can't... You're not gonna have this most beloved character, and I don't care how beloved he is. You don't get to be like, here's a show where he's Hitler, and then have people still like him.
Yeah, no, trying to show...
Even a show, sorry, but even a show, because people say, no, you do the show about how he finds the good. I'm sorry, especially in 2021, you don't take a show where it's like, here's how Hitler learned to be nice. It's not going to work.
Even if you ignore that part, I don't think it would work from the standpoint of Iroh's character because it's somewhat, at least, because Iroh talks about his, after his defeat at Ba Sing Se and coming back, and how he then basically went on this introspective journey. You can't show that on TV. It would be the most boring thing on the face of the planet.
Well, my idea was a show that we don't do a prequel about Iroh. What if, I don't think it works out timeline-wise, what if Iroh and Varric got like an apartment together in the city, and they, and like Iroh would work at a tea shop, and Varric would have a crazy scheme every day.
Oh my gosh. I don't think it would work timeline-wise, but I think it could very easily become something like Potter Puppet Pals on the internet.
Ooh, well, there's an idea for our next project.
Oh, no.
Or what about Iroh and Varric? Iroh and Varric as... I don't know how much you've seen the show, but like as the Skipper and Gilligan. Well, Iroh doesn't really work.
No, I don't think that really works very well.
No, alas. But I think that Iroh and Varric.
I think that would work very well as like something like Potter Puppet Pals were on the internet. I think that would work out quite well.
Well,
I don't necessarily want to produce it though.
In any event, I think that. I mean, I don't know if that's the ultimate answer, but he definitely, even if it's not that,
he's still a mellowing factor for everybody.
And even if it's not specifically him. Are the writers, and again, I think you're going to want to say yes, but I'd like to go back and see. Are the writers balancing that stuff out well with other things?
My guess would be yes, considering the fact we're not complaining about it. The whole point of this is that we complain about it with other characters.
What is Katniss balanced out with Peeta?
Peeta's not really a good balance.
What is Harry? I honestly don't remember. What balances Harry in the Order of the Phoenix?
Nothing balances Harry because Harry is in his head the entire time, and Ron and Hermione are off being hormonal and snipping at each other.
Yeah, I don't remember even what they do in that book.
There's the Dumbledore's Army. That's Dumbledore's Army in Umbridge.
That's all. It's so intense, though.
And there's all the nonsense with Quidditch, and Harry's constantly getting in trouble with Quidditch. And
yeah, see, that's also
Snape's
intense.
It's just that book is just very. There's not a lot of light in that book.
Yeah.
That book is just very, very heavy all the time. There's this stuff with Sirius. Dumbledore's Army is occasionally kind of light and fun in some of the individual meetings and stuff like that. When they talk about the meetings, like Neville mastering spells, some of that gets kind of light and fun, and there's occasionally some fun stuff with Dobby because Hermione learned how to knit with stuff, and so Dobby's taken over cleaning of the common room because the house elves don't want to get freed accidentally, and they're very upset with Hermione, but Harry can't tell her. Spew.
That's from the fourth one.
Oh, okay.
And I was about to say that's what I remember about the Goblet of Fire is I remember that you do sort of have some of this intense stuff in that book.
Oh, there's loads of intense stuff.
You have the opening, part where the Death Eaters attack the World Cup.
Well, even before that, you had Voldemort and the Snake and the Old Man.
Yeah, that's true. And you have the kind of stuff with Karkaroff, and they're all suspicious, and like Karkaroff and Snape, and you have all kinds of stuff like that. But then I remember the stuff like Spew.
And the Yule Ball was largely like light and fun.
And the Yule Ball is Grop from the fourth book.
No, Grop is sixth.
The sixth, really?
Yes, and Grop is not really light and fun in the book.
Okay. Maybe not. I guess I do remember. You have Fred and George trying to get into the cup.
That's the lighthearted thing in the Order of the Phoenix is Fred and George working on the Weasley's Wizards. Tongue twister.
I just don't remember that.
The problem is that there's so little of the leavening in that book that you forget about it unless you spend a bunch of time thinking about it.
So, in Avatar,
you have loads of leavening.
You have a lot of lightness. And it's not that Avatar ever gets super intense, but you have the characters who are grumpy or
they have bad days.
Or they have bad days, but they're offset, I think, by other stuff.
Mm-hmm. Even by their own good days, they're well offset by those.
But what I mean is that you, in an individual show, he's being angsty right now, but then you have something else that is
Momo.
That is like Momo.
Momo is comic relief. That is essentially his.
You have other stuff that's lightening it.
Sokka's stupid jokes.
Yeah, what's going on in that? The one where, okay. So specific example. Remember the one where Toph is trying to teach Aang how to earthbend for the first time?
Yes, and Aang is
and they're fighting.
And Aang is being angsty
super angsty, yes.
And giving up.
And Toph is kind of being a jerk, but you almost are okay with it in that case because you're more upset with Aang.
Because he's being wishy-washy and he's not
And
trying.
then Katara thinks she knows everything and she's trying to like tell Toph what to do.
Which
and
is not
all
helping
this
Toph.
kind of intense, unlikable, just uncomfortable stuff. And then you have Sokka stuck in the talking to the little animal, right?
I'm trying to figure out how to get out. Please let me eat you. I'm just hungry.
Yes.
Oh yes, hello, it's little saber-toothed moose thing. And he's like, wait, what? Yeah, the mothers are very protective of their young. Hi, mama. I'm going to eat you now. Hi.
But that's all the stuff going on in the middle of that.
Yeah.
Is that what's going on? And I think the ones where Aang is upset that Appa's been lost. I think you do have Iroh, right?
I think there's some Iroh, but that's also when Sokka gets drunk on cactus juice.
That's true.
So you have Sokka lightening it up again.
But it doesn't feel artificial.
No, it still feels very natural.
You can do comic relief that it just feels like it's injected to.
Yeah,
and it would work if you did that.
Especially because it is Sokka getting specifically because it's Sokka getting drunk on cactus juice. It's the kind of thing you would expect. It's what everybody knows about deserts. Cactuses are the source of water in deserts, at least in North America, because they're not actually cacti don't grow in Africa. But cacti are a source of water, so that's what you would expect. And then Sokka drinks it, and then he kind of go loopy for a while.
Yeah.
So it makes sense in universe, and it makes sense to us watching it. It doesn't just make it feel like it's injected comic relief. It makes sense given what we know about cactuses and also what we know about the fact that they mix animals up. Because everything is slightly different. Because they've got like the platypus, like when they're. I'm saying that the fact that they've done that kind of to the universe, where it's like they take things and they kind of change it a little bit. It makes sense then. At least as a viewer watching it, that they would take cactuses and take the liquid that's in them and make it.
Oh yeah.
LCD.
Yeah, no, it just it
makes
LSD.
Yeah, that.
No, that makes sense. So I think that if that's not the answer, this definitely is an answer that.
A part of the answer.
Yeah, that for all of the. When they're trying to take one of these characters and humanize them and show them as a less than perfect person,
they find ways to lighten the mood.
They do lighten it, and they give you other stuff to enjoy. So even if you can get the point of the character development, but you can also enjoy what's going on with the other.
Oh, that one episode when Aang is being all angsty and upset because of how he left the air temple and everything. You've also got Sokka and the fishermen trying to figure out how not to die in the middle of a hurricane, which shouldn't be funny, but Sokka's making jokes through it and trying to figure it out, while you've got Aang kind of being all glum and saying it's his fault and blaming himself for the war, essentially.
Yeah, and I think, and to kind of come back to how we started the conversation, although it wasn't the main point by any means to just compare Avatar to Korra, I don't think you have that same kind of lightness in Korra.
No, they try to do it with Bolin and whatever his fire ferret thing's name was. No, I'm talking about the ferret thing.
Oh.
They try to make that ferret thing kind of like Momo, but it doesn't really. He's like an after. Momo is a part of the game.
Show, yeah.
And I don't even remember the stupid thing's name, but that's just kind of like an afterthought that shows up once in a while.
Yeah, I don't think they have okay, so Korra does have Varric, and Varric works very well.
Varric was annoying.
See, that's maybe the thing though. I thought Varric was great, but I can understand how some people would find it to be annoying. The
way they did Varric, especially with Judy, the Judy do the thing was kind of funny. But the way he treated Judy, like he could get pretty like.
Varric is a tough character because
he could get pretty nasty.
Varric is a tough character because Varric is a character that I'm trying to think of a comparison. He's a character that kind of starts off more sinister. Sinister isn't the word exactly.
Kind of threatening almost.
Threatening, but as the series goes on, he becomes more of a not comic relief exactly, but a accepted good guy in a sense.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
He's scheming. He's
kind of
always
like,
got these schemes.
You know, maybe a decent comparison. He's kind of like Q.
A little bit, yeah.
Q starts off very sinister.
Yes.
And then it becomes kind of this
capricious trickster.
Yeah, towards the end. And that's the same thing as Varric in a sense.
Minus the omnipotent powers that Q has.
But I just don't think that, I think that Korra has so much
Korra's just constantly heavy
darkness.
all the time. Yeah.
It's so heavy that Varric can't make it up. And then they try to make it up with like Bolin, and then when he becomes Nuntuck or whatever his name is, the TV show that he's in.
I don't remember.
And that was funny. I enjoyed that stuff, but even that was because that whole thing, remember,
was because of the war.
The whole thing with him being Nuntuck is, as I recall, wasn't part of that like a scheme to get him out of the picture?
It wasn't a scheme to get him out of the picture. It was part of Varric's scheme because there was the problem. I think that was during the one with the Water Tribe issues, and so that was part of his scheme to like go to war with the Water Tribe or drum up stuff for the Water Tribe. So like, yes, it was the Nuntuck stuff was funny, and the way Bolin kind of believed this stuff was also somewhat amusing, but because of the darker intentions behind it. It did not, because it was basically warmongering.
It wasn't just
warmongering propaganda, so it couldn't be completely lighthearted.
It wasn't just like something that's lighthearted on the side. It was a lighthearted element to a really heavy thing.
Yeah, that's in it. So, and Korra doesn't have. So that's all.
And then Korra's constantly going through like all kinds of trauma and all kinds of like suffering and like the villains are really
nasty
and dark. I mean, so the Fire Lord Ozai in Avatar was a sinister, really evil guy.
You don't see his face for the first 2 seasons.
You don't see
him really sinister,
right? Which is true, but he's like you're seeing their evil actions and you know they're bad, but you don't get to really see the real darkness until very close to the end.
Yeah.
And so, but with all the villains in Korra, it's like you see pretty early on how kind of nasty they are.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of hanging over everything.
But to a certain extent, though, also Ozai was in some ways a scarier villain than any of the villains in Korra because of the way they built him up and the fact that all you're seeing are the repercussions of what his orders are. You're not actually seeing him scheme and plan. So when you do finally start seeing him personally in the 3rd season, he feels much, especially the fact that he looks so ordinary and he looks almost pretty, makes him seem that much more so part of it is also he might not be as overpowered as some of the bad guys in Korra, but he feels more evil. At least to me, the way they did Ozai he feels, at the very least, he's 10,000 times more evil than Kylo Ren ever was.
He feels yes, I would say he feels evil in a yes, but
I think some of that is
I think he feels less I think that the Korra villains feel heavier in a sense, in a way that is not as easily balanced out by the stuff that they're trying to do for the lightness in that show.
I think I agree with that. I think part of it is Ozai is not, like, Ozai is there in the first 2 seasons, but he's not actually physically there most of the time. Like, you might see him once every 6 episodes. You start seeing him more often the closer you get to the end of the show, but you don't see him very often in the first 2 seasons. And then when you start seeing him more in the third season, you're also seeing Zuko's memories of him growing up. And so you're seeing lighter sides of him. You don't ever see the light sides of the villains in the Korra movie. You only, not the Korra movie, the Korra show. You only see them doing the evil. They're never given any kind of depth. They are just evil and they are nasty.
No. Some of them are given depth, but the depth is really dark.
Well, but they're not ever given any kind of balance, showing them as being a full person. I
think I agree with that. So for instance, Amon, right?
Mm-hmm.
He is essentially what he is because he was abused by his father. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
He is a guy that was made what he was because of really bad experiences. So there's definitely a balance there. Not a balance, but there's a humanness that you can see.
True, but you don't ever get to see him before his father essentially abused him into becoming what he was.
Well, you see flashbacks.
You don't, but you only see the flashbacks of the abuse. You don't see flashbacks.
No, but you can see that he's a better person at that time. And then he's. I don't think you're remembering it.
Probably not, because I didn't.
But I don't remember anything about Zahir, and I don't understand why. But he's this super popular villain.
Why?
I don't know why. I don't remember anything about him.
Wasn't he the Airbender?
He was. I don't feel
the one who could fly, which confuses me why that was a thing, because Aang flew all the time.
I don't feel like he had a whole lot of. I don't feel
like there was a group of anarchists that were all imprisoned, and then he got out because he got airbending.
Yeah, no,
and somehow he mastered it faster than anybody has mastered anything ever.
But that's not even my complaint. I'm just saying I don't remember that he had to your point. I don't think he had a lot of. I don't remember any great depth and motivation. I think there was some, but it was wasn't he was just really obsessed with this one airbender.
Yes.
Historically, that's like.
And he was obsessed with anarchy. He thought he was obsessed with anarchy and destroying the way things work.
What's his name? Is it Uzalan? Not Uzalan. That's what's the name?
You mean the waterbender?
Unalak was the guy who is in the second season, the guy that wants to do the murder the spirit or something.
Murder the white spirit, whatever
I don't remember.
The only part of that season that I liked, I kind of liked the backstory for the first Avatar. I kind of liked it.
And then Kuvira, who shows up in the third season.
She does actually show up, because she's one of the metal benders.
As a different character, but she's another character. You're right. You're never given this. She has this desire for she wants to make the world better by it being ordered, and she thinks her way of doing it is the best way, and so she's going to use her power. But that's how many bad guys, that's their story out
so
there.
Many of them now.
It's
such a popular backstory for villains is that they're really trying to do a good thing, but they're just doing it in a bad way. That's so many villains now.
But all of them, and all of and then the whole time you have Korra suffering from all this kind of trauma, and she's been abused or put through this kind of torture or whatever, and you got all that stuff, and then it just doesn't. That's so intense, and that could be a show that's dark and intense can be fine and enjoyable, but.
The problem is that it's
just nothing. It's not like an Avatar where there's anything to balance it out.
And it doesn't, because it's supposed to be for the same age range as like Avatar, and it can't work for the same age range as Avatar because there's nothing to make it enjoyable for that age range to watch.
Yeah, it's
other than bending.
It's all intense without anything to surround it with. Usually stuff that's really intense
is just intense.
I can think of, movies. It's a really dark film, but it's a film. You watch it 2 hours and it's over.
You're done.
There's not many TV shows where the whole thing is just dark.
From start to finish.
One of the darkest ones I can think of is like Breaking Bad, which you haven't seen.
I have not seen it, but that was my thought. Was like Breaking Bad.
But Breaking Bad.
But I haven't seen it, so I don't know.
Does it have its episodes that are just super dark? Yes. But it's not just, there is lightness to it as well. Even in the darkness, that's one of the things about that show that's done well, is they took something that's really dark, and usually it's balanced out well, at least enough that it just doesn't become just this burden to watch. You want to keep watching it to see what happens. Sometimes it gets really dark and there's no light at the end of the tunnel at all. But then, yeah, they put some stuff in that kind of helps. And I just think that might be the biggest difference between the two series, is Korra is so much darker, and the stuff they put in to try to balance, I just don't think it has the same heart. Another thing in Korra that they don't have is they put in the goofy stuff. The Sokka with the cactus juice, the Sokka but they don't put in the Iroh, who is just the
wise temperament.
The wise kind of, it's the serious lightness. You know what I mean?
Yeah. They try to do it with Tenzin. But they don't do a very good job.
They don't do a good job. Because Tenzin is... So one of the things they don't do in shows anymore is, it used to be like, you could just have a character who's
good,
who doesn't have flaws. And Iroh doesn't really have notable flaws.
No. He follows his brother, the Firebender, a little too long, maybe, but that's it.
And it's mostly in the past. I mean, Tenzin is just too flawed to be that character. And Tenzin doesn't have to be Iroh.
No.
He doesn't have to be flawless.
He doesn't have to be an Iroh clone.
He doesn't. But what I'm saying is, he's the closest thing that Korra has.
Yes. And Korra treats him like an obstacle to whatever she wants.
Right.
She treats him like he's discardable, whereas Zuko had the wise mentor character, and Zuko really respected his uncle and looked up to his uncle.
And he comes to a breaking point where he sends him away.
Yes, but then Zuko regrets.
But it works in the story.
So hard.
Korra just starts off not liking Tenzin,
and she never really shows that she likes him at any point.
Even
she never really values him. He's just in the way.
Yeah, you don't get to. It just doesn't work.
No.
You feel bad even when Tenzin is making the show better. The one thing I'll say that I will say for Korra that does in the later seasons, I actually really liked it work. So I already mentioned Varric, and I do like Varric. I think he works. But the other thing that I think really works, and it was like, as he was in the series, it was more and more like I wanted more of him. I wanted
more of the interaction between him and his siblings.
Yes.
I wanted more Tenzin, Bumi, and What's-Her-Face.
Especially Bumi.
Yes.
Bumi is the best character in that show, maybe.
Yes.
And Bumi could have been.
Could have been Iroh.
Not the same as Iroh.
No.
But he could have fulfilled the same role. He could have done something similar.
Yes.
I just think he just wasn't used enough.
He was underutilized.
But it was also the kind of thing, we started to use him more. I don't think it would have necessarily worked.
Not without drastically changing the way they wrote the show. Which would have been a good thing, but...
So I think a show about Tenzin.
Much better idea than Korra.
Than a show about Korra. It's just crazy.
Tenzin and his family and his siblings were much better characters than Korra and Mako and Bolin and What's-Her-Face. It was just... They had such better dynamics, and they felt much more natural together to me.
Yeah.
And they were just more interesting characters. I always wanted more of Tenzin's family, Tenzin's kids, Tenzin's siblings, especially Tenzin's siblings. I loved the interplay between Tenzin and his siblings. I want more. Yeah. Well, I wanted more. I don't know that I necessarily want them to go back and make more now, because we know how that goes with TV shows.
Well, and, I guess maybe a good way to tie it up would be to say that they are... of course, they're supposed to be making this series for Netflix. We're redoing Avatar. And who knows what's going to, come of it.
probably make it into Korra. All dark, no light. That's what they do to all the TV shows now. They make everything dark and angsty and...
Yeah. I mean, they already... The series description already makes it sound like it's going to be like
terrible.
Environmentalist.
Yeah, which is...
And that's the thing these days. Well, it's one of the things. There's a million things. But like, one of the most incredible things, one of the most, just modern things ever was when, in The Good Place, when Eleanor goes, she goes back to Earth and they should have like a second chance of being a good person. And being a good person is she's an environmentalist.
Yeah, and she's trying to sign people up. And not only is she an environmentalist, she's one of those people who stands in the street corners who usually is working for like some kind of scuzzy company that is trying to get you to sign up for stuff. And
but she's trying to save the Earth. So that's what it sounds like. I mean, that's one of the thing for the new Avatar on Netflix. The way that the description that they recently released reads, it's like as if the Avatar's role is he's like inspired by nature or guided or by the planet or something. I don't remember the exact.
Something like that, yeah. Like he's the spirit of the planet or something.
Yes, he's the spirit of the Earth. As opposed to, and that's another. I mean, from Avatar to Korra, they kind of, I guess, evolved what the Avatar's kind of role all is. I don't think it necessarily flows quite great.
No. Part of the problem with that, though, is just the way they completely changed the setting for Korra. And Korra went from the kind of Eastern fantasy style to steampunk.
Yeah, and so I actually was recently thinking, and I can accept that more than I could originally, because I had a thought, but it doesn't mean I think it's enjoyable. So here's the thing. When you watch Avatar, everything you just said about the kind of Eastern agrarian sort of, like society is true. For the Earth, water tribes, not necessarily air tribe because they're dead.
They're not there.
But the Fire Nation has the steampunk stuff. The Fire Nation.
They're heading towards the industrial.
They have cars, basically. Not cars exactly, but they have machines that move, right? They have all that stuff. They're industrialized to a degree. And the idea of Korra is that you're now like 100 years later in a world where the Fire Nation has joined back with all the other nations. So now you're seeing...
now living in harmony.
So now you're seeing the Fire Nation's sort of what they had with the benefit of all the other stuff. Think about Ba Sing Se, and Ba Sing Se is kind of also a modern city.
Because they've got the earthbenders in their trains
They
and stuff like that.
did it with other means. Take the ingenuity, take sort of all of the different characteristics of all the different tribes, and mash it with the technology the Fire Nation already has. And 100 years... I guess maybe it works, especially when you consider the idea, this is not the Earth. This is a world that is much smaller, okay? There's not nearly the need to expand this stuff everywhere. I still don't think it's as enjoyable.
I still don't like it, but that at least makes it make more sense in universe. I still don't like it. It's not that I have anything necessarily against steampunk as its own. I think it can work. I think steampunk can work depending on how it's done. I just don't think it was a good setting for Avatar.
Yeah.
I think steampunk could be a setting that works depending on the story you're telling. I don't think it works for this story. I think it's taking it too far away from what it originally was.
Well, in any case, I think that sort of...
I think that's a good stopping point.
That really kind of ties it all together. So, I don't know if it's the answer, but Avatar works in part because you do have for everything that is not good about it. And I don't mean artistically good, but I mean, who wants to be around a person who's being angsty?
Who wants to be around a jerk?
Who wants to be around a person that constantly thinks that they know better than everybody else and is kind of like... I just thought I would tell you that this is really the best way to do it.
Why are you doing your Valley Girl voice?
I didn't intend to do my Valley Girl
Well,
voice.
you did your Valley Girl voice.
That was not my Valley Girl voice.
Well, no, you didn't do the Valley Girl grammar with it, but that was the Valley Girl voice.
So, I just wanted to, tell you that if you, tell Aang stuff, that he's, bad,
Oh my gosh.
he gets, unhappy. A much better way of, teaching Aang is he responds really well to, positive reinforcement.
This is making me really uncomfortable. But it always makes me uncomfortable when you do that.
So, I think Avatar is, a show that the Iroh and, Sokka, help the fact that Aang is sometimes, grumpy.
I wouldn't call him grumpy. I would call him, whiny.
And so, but in some of these other series, it's just not done as well.
No.
Whether Korra, Harry Potter, gosh, it seems like, for whatever reason, when Suzanne Collins writing the Hunger Games, she just flat out forgot that people could occasionally be friendly.
Or likable.
Yeah. What does it say about that show? Isn't it kind of true? By the end of the thing, isn't Effie one of the most likable characters in the whole book?
Pretty much, yeah.
It's so terrible.
Because then Prim dies. So sorry, spoilers. Prim dies. After Prim dies, Effie is basically the most likable person left.
It just doesn't even make any sense.
No, there are elements of likable characters in everybody, but most of them die. If somebody's likable, they usually die. Rue dies. Mags dies. Prim dies. They get one good character per book and they die.
So, but Avatar handled that really well. So I guess the takeaway is if you're trying to write something, make sure that if you have to have, when you have to have, because you have to have conflict. You have to have,
you have
to have your hero be flawed. I mean, you don't have to, but
there has to be some kind of conflict for the hero to encounter.
And the hero has to have some kind of growth. Mm-hmm. And usually that means that the hero has to have some kind of internal conflict. Struggle.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, I would say, I have to think this through, that the villain of the first season of Avatar is the general, I forget his name.
Chow.
Whatever his name is, the guy that wants to kill the moon.
Yes.
The villain of the third season is Ozai.
Yes.
But the villain of the second season is Aang. Not that Aang's the villain, but he's struggling against primarily his own self.
Which makes sense because that's the season.
I mean, okay, you have the Dai Li and you have all that stuff.
You have Azula.
You have Azula. True. And I think Azula is the villain, but in a certain sense, she doesn't come to a head really in that season in the way
she does in the third
season. I mean, so she kills Aang at the end, so maybe I'm understating things, but there's still a sense in which I feel like really what you're watching in that Earth book of Avatar is Aang trying to deal with his own weaknesses. Which makes sense because
they mention this when Aang is starting to learn earthbending. Earth is his natural opposite. Because he is air, he is learning earth. So it makes sense that in the Earth book is when Aang is coming up against the most internal struggles.
Yeah.
At least that makes sense to me, at least thematically.
So you have to have that stuff.
You have to have that stuff, otherwise you have no story.
But when you have that stuff,
you have to have something to...
Give it something to make it... It doesn't mean you have to just have comic relief constantly offsetting everything.
It doesn't even need to be comic relief. Right. You just need to have something to still make you like the character.
To still make you want to read the book or watch the show.
You need some element of good.
Yeah.
Good is important. If you don't have good, where's the appeal?
All right. Well, anyways, let us know what you think. If you have some topic that you would be interested in hearing us discuss, let us know.
Have a good night. Or day, or whatever, whenever you're watching us.